Hello and welcome back to part 2 of this business environment mock exam walkthrough. So in this part 2 video we'll be going through task 5 through to 8. And remember, if you do find these videos useful, drop it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more AAT content. Okay, what we'll do now is swap over to the mock and make a start. So then, task 5 is worth 10 marks and is about control accounts, reconciliations and using journals to correct accounts. This task contains part A and B. Spooks and Sparkles Co. is a business supplying fancy dress costumes. It has a credit balance on the payables ledger of £17,648.76. The balance on the payables ledger control account is £16,692.74. The following differences have been identified. A discount received of £165.05 was recorded on the debit side of the individual supplier account in the payables ledger, but on the credit side of the payables ledger control account. Then we've got a purchase return of £1,286.12 was included in the payables ledger control account, but was missed from the individual balance in the payables ledger. And finally, a transposition error was made when entering a purchase into the daybook. It was recorded as £2,345.52, but should have been £3,245.52. Okay, so we know what our errors are. It then says part A, complete the adjustments to the payables ledger and payables ledger control accounts by selecting items from the pick list and entering figures in either the debit or credit column for 8 marks. Okay, so let's work down these logically. So we'll start with the first error and see what we need to do with it, which account it's going to affect, and then look at how we go about correcting it. Okay, so the first one, a discount received of £165.05 was recorded on the debit side of the individual supplier account in the payables ledger, but on the credit side of the payables ledger control. So first of all, we need to determine which side should it have gone on. And once we know that, we can then determine which one we need to adjust. So remember, for the payables ledger control and the payables ledger, it shows how much we owe to our suppliers. So it is a liability. Therefore, the more we owe to our suppliers, the more we credit the account, increasing the liability. Anything that reduces the amount that we owe would go on the debit side of the account and reduce the liability. Now, a discount received would reduce the amount that is owed to our supplier and would therefore go on the debit side of the payables ledger and the payables ledger control. Now, it's correctly gone on the debit side of the individual supplier account in the payables ledger, so that is correct, but it's gone on the credit side of the payables ledger control account. So not only has it not been recorded on the debit side, it's actually also been recorded on the credit side, which means that the difference has been doubled. If it had just been missed out, we could have just entered it on the debit side. However, because it's gone on the credit side, we need to double up the amount to both reverse the transaction that's gone to the credit side and put it in on the debit side as it should have been. So what we would do, we would take our £165.05 and double it, because we know that we need to correct double the amount due to it going on the credit side of the account. Now, if we double that amount, so £165.05 times 2, that gives us £330.10. So we'd go down to our payables ledger control, because that's the one where the error's been made. We'd select our discounts received, and then we want to debit it, because it should have gone on the debit side, for that doubled value. So for £330.10. Now the next one, a purchase return of £1,286.12 was included in the payables ledger control account, but was missed from the individual balance in the payables ledger. So that one's a little bit more straightforward. We know straight away that it's going to affect the payables ledger. So all we need to do is enter in this purchase return to our payables ledger. Now, bear in mind, a purchase return will again reduce the amount that is owed to our suppliers and therefore would go on the debit side of the payables ledger and the payables ledger control. So we'd select purchase returns and we would debit them for £1,286.12. And then the last one, a transposition error was made when entering a purchase into the daybook. It was recorded as £2,345.52, but should have been £3,245.52. Okay, so this one will affect both, because if we think about it, the amounts that have been transferred from the purchase daybook will go both into the payables ledger and the payables ledger control. So this error will affect both of these accounts. Now, because these are purchases on credit, this would increase both the payables ledger and payables ledger control. So the entry should go on the credit side of the account. However, we are doing the correction here. So what we need to double check is, have we put this in too high or have we put it in too low? Now, if we look at this, it states it was recorded as £2,345.52 and should have been £3,245.52. So we've actually entered this in too low. So we've credited the account. It doesn't say anything about putting it on the wrong side, but we've put it in too low. So all we need to do is credit both of these accounts for the difference to bring it up to what it should have been entered in the first place. So to get the amount, first do the difference between our two figures. So our £2,345.52 and our £3,245.52. And that gives you a difference of £900. So all we need to do is add that into both of these accounts. So what we would do is select from this list our transposition error. We'd do it on both accounts and it would be £900 in both. So that finishes off part A. Let's now scroll down to part B. So then, Spooks and Sparkles have produced the trial balance as at the 31st of December, and a suspense account with a debit balance of £879 has been created to make the debits and credits equal. Okay, so first we just need to think then, why would you have a suspense account with a debit balance? Well, that would be caused for one of two reasons. Either your credits are too high or your debits are too low. And by creating that suspense account with a debit balance of £879, it has brought your debits and credits equal. So part B states identify which two of the following could be possible explanations for why a debit balance exists on the suspense account. So what we're looking for here is something that's either made our debits too low or our credits too high. And that will explain, or could possibly explain, why it's created this suspense account with a debit balance. So let's have a look at this first one. The purchase of an asset for £879 was recorded as an expense. Well, both of these are debit entries, so although it's gone to the wrong account, it wouldn't have any effect on our trial balances, i.e. our debit or credit balances, because both of them should be debits. So that's not a problem in terms of causing an imbalance. It would just need to be corrected by taking out the expense account and put to the asset account. The next one, a discount allowed of £879 was recorded twice in the receivables ledger control. Well, this is going to cause an imbalance. What we need to check is, will it make our debits too low or will it make our credits too high? In which case it could explain why there's an £879 suspense account balance, with a debit balance, should I say. So let's think about this. A discounts allowed was recorded twice in the receivables ledger control. Well, a discounts allowed would be recorded on the credit side of your receivables ledger control account. Remember, the entries for a discount allowed are to debit the discounts allowed, credit the receivables ledger control, and debit VAT if there's VAT on it. Now, if it's been recorded twice in the receivables ledger control, what that means is you've credited the receivables ledger control account twice. Now, your receivables ledger control account will have a debit balance on it. So if we've credited it twice, we've lowered our debit balance on the receivables ledger control twice. So that could be a plausible reason as to why we have a suspense account that's being created with a debit balance on, because we've reduced our receivables ledger control account, which has an overall debit balance on it, twice. So that could be a possible reason. The next one, a purchase return of £879 was recorded twice in the payables ledger control. Okay, so again, let's think about which side would the purchase returns go on in the payables ledger control. Well, the payables ledger control is a liability. It's money that we owe. We've just spoke about that. Now, it will have an overall credit balance on because it's a liability. But a purchase return reduces that liability. So it reduces your credits because it goes in on the debit side of the payables ledger control. So if it was entered in twice, it would actually mean that our credits are too low. Now, in this scenario, we're looking for something that's either caused our debit balances to be too low or our credit balances to be too high. So that would not be a plausible explanation as to why we have a debit balance in our suspense account. If it was the other way and we had a credit balance in our suspense, then that would be a possible reason. However, because it's not, it would not be. And then the last one, a rent expense of £439.50 was recorded as income. So that could definitely explain what this difference is. That would mean that your credits are higher than your debits, because we know that a rent expense should have been entered in as a debit into the rent expense account, but it's been entered in as income, which is a credit, which means our credits are too high and our debits are too low. So that again would be a possible reason. Now, they are particularly tricky, those. So if you're looking at this and you've just listened to the explanation and you're still thinking, yep, that's tough, please don't worry too much. It's 2 marks. What I would suggest in your exam is do your absolute best on this. I want you to try and explain it. However, trying to explain this specifically is really down to your understanding of double entry bookkeeping. If you really understand that well, then you will do really well on these. If you're still unsure, it's not actually these questions that's tripping you up. It's more than likely that you are not 100% on your double entry bookkeeping as of yet. So do your absolute best. Draw out the T accounts if you need to as well. However, they will kind of only take you so far on questions like this. Like I say, you will need a good understanding. Okay, so that finishes task 5. Let's now move on to task 6. So then, task 6 is worth 7 marks and is about the principles of contract law. This task contains part A and B. Part A, identify which one of the following institutions is the highest court in the UK for 1 mark. So we've got 3 options. We've got the High Court, the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. So hopefully this is one that you have read within your textbooks. And the highest court in the UK is the Supreme Court. Okay, moving down. Jordan buys collectible game cards and hears that Lydia, a fellow collector, is selling a rare card through her online shop. The timeline of the events is as follows. On the 1st of October, Jordan sent Lydia an email and offered to buy the card for £100. 1st of October, Lydia received this offer. The 2nd of October, Lydia posted a reply to Jordan on accepting this offer and asked him how he was going to pay her. On the 3rd of October, Jordan saw another copy of the same card for sale on eBay for £50. He bought this card and immediately rang Lydia. Lydia's phone went straight to voicemail, so he left her a message stating that he didn't want to buy the card from her anymore. And then on the 4th of October, Jordan received Lydia's letter of acceptance. Part B then, identify which of the following statements about offer and acceptance of contracts is correct. So we've got 3 options here, so 1 mark for the correct option. When an offer and an acceptance are made in a business context, it is presumed that the parties did intend to create a contract. Well, that one is true. So let's just have a look at the other two to make sure that they are false. When an offer and an acceptance are made in a social context, it is presumed that the parties did intend to create a contract. Well, that one would be false. That isn't correct, because when it's in a social context, there's not always the assumption that you are creating a contract. So that would be incorrect. And then the third one, when an offer and an acceptance are made in any context, it is presumed that parties did intend to create a contract. So we know that that one is false because, as I've just said, if it's in a social context, then it would not be always considered to be creating a contract, particularly if it was between friends. There's not always that presumption that you are creating a contract, so therefore it would be false. So it would be our top option. Scrolling down. Identify whether the following statements about contracts are true or false. The advert on eBay is an invitation to treat. That is absolutely true. So it's effectively an invitation for someone to make an offer on that listing. So that would absolutely be true. The next one, there is no valid contract as Jordan revoked the offer when he called Lydia on the 3rd of October. So that one would be false. So if we just scroll back up to the scenario here, there is a form of consideration and there has been an offer to pay that consideration £100 for this rare card. So there has been an invitation to treat and there has been an offer. Now, because Lydia has then posted a reply to Jordan, and under the postal rules, once the letter is sent, that is you accepting the contract. And the date at which you post that is the acceptance date. So therefore, there is a valid contract between Lydia and Jordan. So that one would be false. The third one, there is no valid contract as Jordan has not paid for the card. So again, that one would be false. You don't have to physically pay for it because there has been an agreed consideration between the two parties, that being the card and the amount of £100 which has been accepted. So there is a valid contract even though he has not physically paid for the goods yet. So that one would be false. And then the bottom one, there is a valid contract as acceptance took place on the 2nd of October when Lydia posted the letter. So that is exactly what I've just been talking about. So that one would be true. So under the postal rules, when she sends that letter on the 2nd of October, that would be classed as accepting the contract. And therefore there is a valid contract between the two parties. So that would be true. Scrolling down, Jordan is now denying that they had a contract, but Lydia insists there is a valid contract between them. Identify the statement that explains the reason Lydia may claim damages. So we've got three different options. We've got to compensate her for expenses incurred. Well, there hasn't really been any expenses from Lydia's side, so it wouldn't be that one. The second one, to ensure Jordan is not in a better position by breaching the contract. So that is not the point of claiming damages. Claiming damages would be about reimbursing you and putting you back into a position as though the contract had actually been followed. So then the last one, to place her in the position she would have been had the contract been performed. There we go. Okay, so it would be our third option. Okay, this is the specific wording that is used. So hopefully you will have that terminology within your textbook under the chapter that covers contract law. So hopefully that does seem familiar to you. When anyone is claiming damages, not that I profess to be an expert on the legal system, but just from our perspective and what you need to know is that when claiming damages, the whole idea is to put you in a position that you would have been had you actually carried that contract out as it should have been, as what has been agreed within that contract. So that finishes task 6. So it is a smaller one, that only 7 marks. We can now move on to task 7. So task 7 is your next written question, and it is for 10 marks and is about bookkeeping systems, receipts and payments, and the importance of information and data security. This task contains parts A through to D. Alice is a yoga instructor. She has set up her cloud-based accounting system on her mobile phone. When she incurs expenses, she pays using a mobile payment app which stores her card details to allow payment direct from her phone. When she visits customers, Alice raises an invoice in her accounting app and takes payment using either her mobile payment app or by bank transfer from the customer. Alice makes a point of always ensuring the customer is invoiced and has sent payment before leaving the appointment. All of Alice's business transactions are processed through a business bank account, but when she needs to take money from the business to pay personal bills, she makes a transfer to her personal account using her online banking app and then uses her accounting app to record the amount taken as drawings. Good, excellent. Okay, it sounds like Alice is doing it correctly. So part A says identify 3 ways in which Alice is benefiting from using digital technology. So it sounds like she's actually benefiting quite significantly from using both cloud-based accounting and particularly the use on her mobile phone. So we've got plenty of reasons that we can go at here. It gives us quite a lot of information here that we can break down and use as benefits. So let's go down these in order. So this first bullet point, when she incurs expenses, she pays using a mobile payment app, which stores her card details to allow payment from her phone. So straight away, that is saving her plenty of time because she's been able to record those expenses, firstly on the go, and more importantly, at the time that they occur, which means there's less chance of her actually missing those and more likely that she will record the receipt for them. So let's get this down. So the first reason I would go with is 1, benefit of using a mobile phone to record expenses is that she can record them at the time at which they were incurred. This saves time and improves accuracy and also means that she has access to the receipts, records them immediately, meaning there is less chance for them to get lost. So I've probably covered 2 points in this. Although I've put 1 benefit at the beginning, I've probably covered 2 points because I've said that it saves time and improves accuracy, but I've also said that it means she's got access to the receipts and records them immediately. So although I've put 1 benefit, it is actually 2 points that I've made within the same point there. So all I might do is add in this and then put also just to show that it's a definite separate point. But I've definitely covered 2 ways there in which she's benefiting from digital technology. So we just need 1 more. Now for this last point, I think I'm going to pick up on this last bullet point where it talks about her transferring money from the business to personal account using her online banking app. It's very, very useful because one of the things as an accountant that can be quite irritating is when somebody pays for personal expenditure from their business account. So the 2 should be kept separate. So that's another way that she's benefiting from using digital technology. So I would say something on the lines of the ability to transfer from business account to personal account means keeping business transactions, looks like the box does extend as well, so that's good. Keeping business transactions and personal transactions separate, which will be beneficial when it comes to preparing her accounts. Okay, so 3 marks there. So we've got 3 ways in which that helps, because I've said that it saves time and improves accuracy. I would say that's 1 mark there. We've said that it means that there's less chance of losing receipts because she can record them immediately. That's your 2nd mark. And then 3rd mark is for saying that she can keep business transactions and personal transactions separate, which will then be beneficial for preparing her accounts. So 3 separate points, 3 marks. Okay, moving down. Alice stores her client's name, address, email address, phone number, and health information on a spreadsheet on her laptop. Her laptop is not password protected, and she often leaves it on the kitchen table in the apartment she shares with 3 friends. Part B, identify which 2 of the following statements are true. So we've got 4 different statements. We need to pick the 2 that are true. Alice does not have to worry about data protection as her business is very small. That would absolutely not be true. There's no limit on size of business for data protection. So that one would be false, so we can ignore that one. The next one, Alice should never keep client data on a spreadsheet. Again, no issues with that. She's more than welcome to keep it on a spreadsheet. A lot of people do. It just needs to be kept securely. So let's hope these bottom 2 are correct. Alice should protect confidential information by password, protecting the spreadsheet containing client details. Absolutely, that would be correct. And then the bottom one, Alice should protect confidential information by password protecting her laptop and keeping it in a secure place. Obviously, that's when she's not using it, so that would be absolutely true. Okay, fairly straightforward those. I think the 2 that are false are fairly obviously false. Okay, let's have a look at the last 2 then. So Kira uses a cloud-based accounting system and she has an alert that her bank statement has not been reconciled. The system has automatically and correctly allocated all payments received to the correct invoices, apart from the following. A customer was invoiced £318, but they have, correctly, taken a prompt payment discount of 10%, so have only paid £286.20. Part C, explain what actions Kira should now take. So hopefully we know how to deal with these from Introduction to Bookkeeping. However, I appreciate for some of you that may have been some time ago now, but we'll be going through it anyway, so that's okay. So when someone has taken a prompt payment discount, you would then need to raise a credit note for the difference between what the invoice value was, so £318, and the amount that was paid of £286.20. So explain what actions Kira should now take. Kira should raise a credit note for the amount of the prompt payment discount. Now, the reason we do this is because if we think about on system, there would have been £318 owed from this customer, but they've paid £286.20. Which is absolutely fine because they've taken the prompt payment discount. The problem is that on our system, that means we've allocated £286.20 against this £318. So it's going to show an amount still owed. But we know that that amount is never going to be paid because it relates to the discount that they've correctly taken. So what we need to do is allocate the payment against the £318, and we also need to allocate the credit note against the £318 to show that there is no more owing from this £318 invoice. So what she would need to do, point number 2, is allocate. So Kira should then allocate the payment from the customer against £318 owed. She should then allocate the credit note once it has been raised against, if I could spell, against the £318 to show that there would be no further amount owed from the customer relating to this transaction. Okay, so 2 marks, and we've made 2 points there to show how she should deal with it. So part D then, state 3 ways in which the use of a cloud-based accounting system has been advantageous to Kira in this scenario. So let's break down the scenario and start from the beginning. So it states Kira uses a cloud-based accounting system and she has had an alert that her bank statement has not reconciled. So the first point that I would make on here is one way in which the cloud-based system has been advantageous is that it has notified Kira that the bank statement has not reconciled to the cash book. That's point number 1. So it's alerted her of this without her having to actually do anything, which is great because then she can investigate it. So that's point number 1. So let's keep reading the statement and see what's next. So the system has automatically and correctly allocated all payments received to the correct invoices. Okay, so the second way it has been advantageous is that it has automatically allocated payments received to the correct invoices, meaning that she hasn't had to do it. Again, that saves time. So in fact, let's add that on the end. This would save Kira time that she could then use work on her business. So then the last point, we would refer to the actual credit note that we need to raise, because she wouldn't know that she needed to do that without manually doing this process, and it would be a lot harder to identify yourself without the system automatically flagging the transaction that's not reconciled. So the third reason is that it enables her to quickly raise the credit note relating to the difference between what the customer has paid and the amount showing as outstanding. This is better customer service and therefore brings more chance of further orders in the future. Okay, so it's asked for 3 ways. We've given 3 ways there of which cloud-based accounting systems have been advantageous to her. All I would say is in the exam, when you've got something like this, make sure that it's specific to the scenario. So we've picked out bits of the scenario here and shown why they're advantageous to Kira specifically. Don't just give generic reasons, because the chances are you won't really get any marks for that. So it does need to be specific to this scenario, unless it does just ask for general reasons. However, that is less likely. Okay, fantastic. So that finishes task 7. So that is your second and final written task. We'll now move on to task 8, which is your final task. So task 8 is worth 14 marks and is about the external business environment. This task contains parts A through to G. Part A, identify 2 of the following that must exist for a market to operate. So we've got 5 options here. We've got suppliers, buyers, businesses, sellers, and competition. So there are 2 quite clear options here. In order for a market to operate, we need someone who's willing to buy the goods and someone who's willing to sell the goods. So it would quite simply be buyers and sellers. Okay, nice easy one to start with. Moving now to part B, identify which one of the following situations is likely to cause an increase in demand. The first one, there is a general reduction in costs. Well, that wouldn't necessarily increase demand. It may help to increase supply, but equally those reduced costs might not impact the selling price. Just because it's costs less to reduce doesn't mean that the selling price has been reduced, in which case it wouldn't have any effect on demand. The second one, household income rises. Well, that will definitely have the potential of increasing demand, because if people have got more disposable income, then demand for products tends to go up. So that one is an absolute possibility. And then the retail price index rises. Well, that would mean that demand would go down, because if a retail price index rises, that means products are getting more expensive and therefore more likely that the demand would drop. So it would be your second option, household income rises. Part C, identify whether the following statements about uncertainty are true or false. So the first one, uncertainty is the same as risk. Oh, it's definitely not the same as risk. So risk is usually associated with something bad happening or the possibility of something bad happening. And then it's about trying to mitigate that risk for the business. Uncertainty doesn't necessarily mean something is bad. It could be, but uncertainty can just be the likeliness of something happening or not. So it's definitely not the same as a risk. The second one, uncertainty means we are not able to predict an outcome. That would be absolutely true. That is one of the definitions for uncertainty. And then the third one, uncertainty is the possibility of something being different to expectation. Again, that one would be true. So that's what I was trying to sort of explain earlier when I was comparing it to risk. So uncertainty can refer to something good or bad. We just don't know as a business whether it will happen or won't happen. Okay, moving down to part D. Identify whether the following risks to a business are internal or external. So statement one, employees leaving to go to a competitor. So because employees are internal, the risk is internal. So although a competitor would be classed as external, because it's referring specifically to employees leaving, the fact that they're going to a competitor actually is somewhat irrelevant. Whether they were just leaving because they wanted to leave the business or to go to a competitor, like I said, would have no impact on whether it was internal or external. It's the fact that they are employees and you have the level of control to be able to hopefully prevent them from leaving by doing certain things within the business, offering fair pay, progression opportunities, flexibility, etc. So it's something that you can manage internally. So then the next one, data theft as a result of hacking by an international operation. So again, this would be internal. Now, I think there is a certain lean towards thinking that this is external because it's coming from an external source. However, it is what you can control as a business. So therefore, it would be internal. So it's making sure you've got the right data protection, the right firewalls, the right IT processes in place to stop that from happening. So although the risk may be coming from an external source, the risk itself to the business is internal because it's what you can control to prevent that. Now the last one, new competitors in the market as a result of changes to international trade deals. So that one would be an external risk. The business has no control over the prevention of new competitors coming into the market as a result of changes, or an international trade deal changing. So they have no control over either of those scenarios, and therefore it would be an external risk to the business. Okay, moving down. Globe Limited have recently signed a contract with a company in Malaysia who use currency known as the Malaysian Ringgit, MYR. The exchange rate has changed from £1 equal to 5.5 Malaysian Ringgit to £1 being equal to 5.2 Malaysian Ringgit. So effectively what that's saying there is that for every £1, the exchange rate, we only now receive 5.2 Malaysian Ringgit in comparison to what we used to receive, which was 5.5 for every £1. So part E, identify the statement which explains what has happened. Okay, so I've accidentally just done that before we've even got onto the question. So let's have a look at these. I think we should know this from what I've just said now. So we've either got the pound has appreciated against the ringgit. We know that that's not true. It's gone down. The pound has strengthened against the ringgit. Again, it's gone down. So it would therefore be that the pound has depreciated against the ringgit. It has gone down in value. So we now get less per pound than what we used to. Okay, part F. Identify which one of the following situations will occur due to the change in exchange rates. So we've got imports from Malaysia will cost more, but straight away, that is absolutely true. If we get less for our money, less for our pound, then the imports from Malaysia will cost more for every £1 that we spend than what it used to, because our money is not worth as much. The second option, imports from Malaysia will cost less, would absolutely be false. So we've just determined why it will cost more, not less. And then the bottom option, let's again just make sure this is incorrect. So there may be less demand for exports to Malaysia. So if anything, it'd be the opposite of that. If the pound has weakened against the Malaysian ringgit, then actually it would be the opposite, and it's more likely for demand for exports to Malaysia to go up, because from the Malaysian perspective, their currency has actually got stronger against the pound, which is a good thing for them. So there's more likely to be a higher demand for exports. So it would be our top option. So in the bottom one, part G, so this is our last question. Identify whether the following statements about tariffs are true or false for 3 marks. So the first one, tariffs are charged by a government on goods and services entering a country. It's absolutely true. So that is the definition of a tariff. Hopefully this is something that you've got within your books. And I think for this, I'm going off on a slight tangent now, but I think this is true for this exam in general, is that there will be certain bits that you just need to read over your textbook and memorize to a certain extent, because it is terminology or wording that you just need to know. So there's a lot, yes, that you can understand, and I'm not saying don't try and understand it, but certain things, it is just about reading over them and really improving your knowledge on what they mean. Okay, so then the second statement, bringing it back to this question now. Tariffs are charged by a government on taxpayers. Absolutely not. It is on goods and services, so that would be false. And then the bottom one. Tariffs are charged by a government on goods and services leaving a country. Again, that would be false. It is when entering into the country. So it's like your import duty, for example. So that covers part G, which is our last question on this task, and this is our last task. So that does finish off this paper. So that does finish off this business environment mock walkthrough. I hope you found it useful, and remember, if you have, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more AAT content. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.